So, to put together the GCC playbook, you spoke to at least 300 people from the industry. When you met with all these leaders, what did you see from a mindset perspective?
One GCC, which was recently they've opened up in Bangalore, and I was talking to their CTO, and he mentioned that, this is a very critical office for us. We are going to do some of our most cutting edge work out of this center, and we will scale up very fast. That's where Bangalore has really carved out a niche for itself, that people see it as a center which will deliver solutions for them which will impact globally.
Now, countries like Poland, Mexico, and Philippines are trying to replicate India's GCC playbook, right? What must India do to stay ahead of this curve?
I think our biggest asset is our people and our talent. Financial incentives is only a tip of the iceberg. Larger chunk is building the education ecosystem, the R&D ecosystem.
So, what is the one hard truth you've encountered about GCC that no one talks about?
Why should I talk about it?
Welcome to this episode of GCC's Unfiltered. Whether you're leading a global capability center, building one, or simply curious about their impact, this is where we cut through the noise and uncover the real choices and leadership stories shaping the future. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Ekroop Kaur, IAS officer and current secretary to the Government of Karnataka for Electronics, IT, BT, and Science and Technology. Over the years, she's worn many hats, from reforming public transport in Bangalore to now shaping policies that will define Karnataka's technology and innovation landscape. Her journey has been about driving transformation, whether it's about making governance more efficient, strengthening Karnataka's position as the GCC capital of the world, or championing initiatives in biotech and skill development. She brings a rare ability to combine vision with execution and creating impact that extends well beyond her tenure. A recipient of the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration, Dr. Kaur's leadership reflects a deep commitment to building ecosystems where innovation, talent, and governance come together. Dr. Kaur, welcome to this episode of GCC's Unfiltered, and it's an honor to have you.
Thanks, Nitika, for having me.
Great. So, I just mentioned that Karnataka is the GCC capital of the world. Some of it happened because we have a thriving startup ecosystem and a base for technologists. But in the recent past, we've seen deeper intervention and partnership from the government. Do you see it as an accident of just an ecosystem coming together, or do you also see a key role with policy today?
So Karnataka has always, been very open and industry-driven when it comes to specifically this sector, which is information technology and biotechnology. Almost 20 years back, the vision groups were created, and vision group for IT, vision group for biotechnology. Each of these has about 15 to 20 very, very eminent people from the private sector, from those industry, who actually help us in shaping the policies. And I think that has been one of the biggest, assets that we have, that government has been open to take their advice and based on their advice shape the policies. So therefore the policies have been very well received, and we have been able to create this kind of ecosystem in Karnataka.
So Karnataka we have 1,780 GCCs in India, and Karnataka holds pole position with most of the GCCs here. Do you think that the state's continued success is going to be the talent, or do you think there's going to be a lot of influence where policy architecture is there?
You said talent. Yeah. So, of course, talent will play the major role with an overall, policy support. So, if I have to say, do a percentage split, it's almost 70 to 80% talent play. But then policies have their own place in terms of creating a conducive work environment, a conducive ecosystem. And when it comes to talent, government has been very, very mindful and deeply invested in creating that talent pool. Karnataka, you would know from, almost like 50 years, We've been pioneers in the education sector, and besides a very elaborate government institution setup, we also have a very strong private institution network, especially when it comes to professional education and STEM education. So building on that, today, because technology changes so fast, and probably right now the pace of change is fastest ever. Almost on a daily basis, there is something new which is happening. So building on the existing education ecosystem, a lot of effort is now being put on developing specific skill sets, whether it is through the skill development department, through their agencies, or by our department, where we are actively collaborating again with the industry through our program called Nipuna, where we allow the industry to set the curriculum, to deliver the content, to select candidates, and then government takes a part of the cost of skilling. And most of these are short duration programs, because a lot of people already have the base skill set. It is only giving them that extra add-on which makes them much more prepared for the emerging technologies. So through our various programs, we are investing heavily on talent, and the policies are also supporting this kind of approach.
So I think one thing I keep hearing from the ecosystem is that the government has become much more open to partner. We were recently at the BFSI consortium, and again, a lot of it was attributed to the support that was provided by the government. So in addition to talking about technologies as a horizontal, I think the government has also been working very deeply across different verticals, right? So one question, when you talked about talent, we are also talking about a large and a broad-based funnel where you're helping young students who come out from educational institutions to have better domain and technology understanding. But there is also a need, as we move into an age of AI, to have super specialists, right? You need to have these think tanks, you need to have people who have a deep understanding and a foundational understanding of technology. Is there anything being done on that side of the spectrum to hone that skill and to push India ahead?
When it comes to really more like a research kind of skills, where people can get into both pure sciences as well as translation kind of work, which is deeply embedded in research. Again, government is supporting a lot of R&D activity in the state. This is also more like a collaborative effort, where we are trying to bridge the gap between academia and industry. We have created platforms where they can come together to deliver. We are also actively working. For example, right now we are in active talks with with ANRF, which is again an organization which is helping build that research ecosystem, because there's a lot of focus that IPs should come out of India. IPs should be not only generated but also registered in India. So to build that capability, we are looking at both ways. We need to see more researchers entering industry, an opportunity to collaborate with them, and industry getting access to the research ecosystem. With the presence of large number of very premier institutions led by IISc, and then we have a whole lot of other institutions which are there, we are seeing that this collaboration is increasing. Like IISc alone has at least 50 different programs with industry to support that deep intellectual and deep research-based talent.
That's fantastic to hear. Now, countries like Poland, Mexico, and Philippines are trying to replicate India's GCC playbook, right? What must India do to stay ahead of this curve?
I think our biggest asset is our people and our talent. We have a very strong foundation, whether right from school education to STEM education in colleges. We are doing very well. We need to just build on this and see that we stay ahead, at least on the talent part of it. We have a very young population, which is again, something which is at this point in time, India is doing the best on that. So we should leverage that to the best. And I don't think the kind of scale which India provides in terms of the large talent pool and the opportunity to scale up for companies because of the access to such talent pool, that is holding us in good stead. We should work on that.
Got it. Now, this is an unfiltered podcast, so I'm going to ask you a little bit of a hard question.
Sure.
So to put together the GCC playbook, I know that Karnataka was the leader in that. You spoke to at least 300 people from the industry. When you met with all these leaders, you don't have to name names. What did you see from a mindset perspective? I'm pretty sure there would have been a mix of people who are future thinkers, some people who are laggards, some people still stuck in a previous version of what a GCC is. It will be good to understand, what was your impression of the industry? Some great ideas, I'm sure, because it was in country.
So some companies and, companies which are also doing very well, what I really like about the change in attitude today is that they don't look at these, and anyways, the name also says global capability centers. They actually look at them as value creators and not as cost arbitrage centers. So some of the very recent GCCs also, which have moved, and not taking names, and one GCC which was recently, they've opened up in Bangalore, and I was talking to their CTO. And he mentioned that, this is a very critical office for us. This is not just an expansion in terms of numbers, and I'm not looking at that. But we are going to do some of our most cutting edge work out of this center, and we will scale up very fast. So that's the kind of confidence which, the leaders are showing in Bangalore. And I think that's where Bangalore has really carved out a niche for itself, that people see it as a center which will deliver solutions for them, which will impact globally.
So now I'm going to flip the script. The Bangalore leaders, are some of them regressive? Not the global leaders, but the India-based leaders. Are they still thinking just like a number rather than a value play?
I think people who are Bangalore-based, or people from Bangalore leading these global capability centers, it is the confidence that they have shown in their team and the confidence that they have actually been able to change the landscape for us.
India hosts 1900 GCC, but globally, people still perceive them as execution engines. Though value that is coming out of here is more comprehensive. Some global leaders understand it. Some people still refer to them as VOTs. Some people still refer to them as captives. If you're thinking of European companies, many of them still think of GCCs in parallel to a services ODC that they run, right? In that case, what do you think the communication from the industry and from the government has been to sort of shift that thinking?
So I think things are definitely changing, and the kind of work which is happening, the work will speak for itself. So from government, as I said initially also, there's a lot of push now for IPs to be from India. And I think the more IPs, the more products that we have from India, which are, end-to-end kind of work happening in India, that will change the perception.
Got it. So when you meet with leaders in different countries, do you find the perception already shifted?
Already shifting, yes. I, again, don't want to take names, but I can, in my mind, I can think of so many, people who are working in India and people who are working in the headquarters who have this opinion now of India, where they have been able to build end-to-end products over here, and they know that that skill is available.
Got it. Yeah. So we're also seeing increasingly, I think one of the deterrents in the past used to be when there's no proximity to customer. So they used to say, product management cannot be done from India, and hence you will always have, but today we are seeing product management roles being played out of here. If there's a white space opportunity in a GCC, for GCCs in India, do you think that there's something that has been overlooked by GCCs currently and they're not capitalizing India enough for the same?
So I think product development as a space is still, not happening as much as it can happen. So as the perception changes, and as the GCCs get into more core roles, that will change, and that is something which will really change the complete tenor of these GCCs.
GCCs. Okay. What do you think has been the biggest gap between the industry and the government till now? I think it's definitely been bridged.
We are trying to bridge that gap as much as possible.
You're building the bridge yourself.
I am trying to.
Yeah, but what do you think? Why do you think that gap existed, and how far do you think that bridge has been built?
So I think it's again a matter of perception. A lot of people who have not really interacted with government, they don't really know where to start and with whom to interact, and there is this general perception of government not being receptive, not being open, and not listening enough. But I think within government, I've been in the system for a fairly long period of time. I think governments are now very, very open, and we would like to collaborate. And Karnataka has had a legacy actually of government working closely with the industry. So people should repose their trust in government, and we are all there to support. We have a very, very active team in government led by the minister, and the overall, if you look across government, there is a lot of collaboration today which is happening with all stakeholders across departments. You can feel that. So let it people have to get out of their perception, which is, I don't know how it has formed, but yes, that perception is there. But government certainly is keen to collaborate.
Correct. And especially, I think, on the GCC policies, you have your handbooks, you have Catalyst now. And I think one key enabler of all of this has been WhatsApp, because I think every government stakeholder, including yourself, are literally one WhatsApp away. So, and extremely responsive as well, right? If you had to write a Harvard Business Review case study on India's GCC story, what would that title be?
The overall capturing the overall thing.
Yeah,
I think from shift from cost arbitrage to value centers.
Okay. So I think we are seeing that as
other days. Actually, we were for a long time, Bangalore was known as a back office, but that's not true any longer.
Yeah, it's, I think, GCC capital of the world. Very soon it may be the AI capital of the world.
Very true.
And there are so many new things happening.
We are already among the 5 topmost AI destinations in the world.
Yeah. And I think we are also India as a populace is also one of the largest consumers of AI.
Yes.
So I think...
government, incidentally, people may not know, but government is also a large consumer of AI.
Really?
There are already so many things which are, deploying AI.
So is there anything you can share with us?
So many solutions. Education department has, collaborated with Microsoft. They are running something which is an AI-based teaching tool. Very talked about how, Bangalore, Mysore police used AI to, monitor and regulate speeds on the speed control on the highway.
It is horrible how many tickets we have.
Yeah, so that's all AI playing. So no human
in the loop.
So in RDPR they have a very interesting chatbot which is AI driven. Many departments have actually now. So government is also deploying AI and finding very innovative uses for it.
Very innovative uses, unfortunately for us, but yes, it forces us to be better. India produces millions of STEM graduates, yet a skill gap persists, right? What do you think that missing link is?
So I think technology changes way faster than curriculum changes. So that's the reason. So STEM graduates do have a very strong foundation in their understanding of the subject, but then to be industry ready, they need some amount of input on what is the latest, and also domain knowledge is very important. That makes them even more adept, and they kind of get into the role very quickly. So these are the things that we are trying to bridge through skilling programs. Another very important thing that we are trying to encourage is internship programs, because while they have the basic knowledge, but interning in a company, interning with a startup, they will get that finesse and the finishing school kind of experience. So that is another thing which government is actively promoting through various policies. So I think it's only like the gap is not major, but it is critical and it needs to be addressed. And we have a fairly multi-pronged kind of an approach, starting from embedded programs in curriculum. Like you just mentioned about BFSI, we are looking at introducing a minor degree for BFSI for both engineering and non-engineering students. We have a program called Kalika Jyote Kaushalya, which is while you are studying in doing your undergrad and post-graduation, you pick up skilling programs on the sidelines. We have industry linkage programs where fresh hires, government supports their training. Then Nipuna, which is the flagship program. So many, a vast variety of programs have been initiated, which gives a lot of flexibility to industry also to see what works best for them, and then work on bridging this skilling gap.
I think that's fantastic. And I speak to industry often. And one thing is, even industry has their skin in the game, the government has their skin in the game, and so do academic institutions. So I think when everything comes together, there is at least some things may click, some things may not, but there is enough effort in all directions happening to change this quickly. So the next question I have is, in an AI first world, do you think we have enough talent of not just users of AI, but foundational builders, right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, you already know that there is so much work happening, not just in large companies which are based out of Bangalore, but also in the startup ecosystem. In fact, we have large number of almost 1,000 plus startups which are working on AI based solutions. There are startups which are also working on foundational models. They have been supported under the National AI Mission as well. So I think since the talent is there, expertise is there, it's only matter of time, and with the right efforts. And under the National AI Mission, a lot of push has been given for building foundational models and for creating the infrastructure for doing that work. So I think we are headed in that direction.
You mentioned the first quantum computer completely
indigenously done in Bangalore. So one of our startups has done it, and it's a 8-qubit computer, and they are now trying to build a 56-qubit quantum computer, but it is completely indigenously done.
So the next question I have is shifting it to the role of industry, right? Should GCCs take a bigger role in building India's broader workforce beyond their employees? So, and what do you think that they need to do? Because, I mean, I know everybody asks what is the government doing for them, but it's very easy to keep taking from that pot but not filling it back, right? So what do you think that the GCC industry should do to contribute, maybe not just to talent, but to the overall development of the local ecosystem?
So I think it's very important for GCCs to collaborate with academic institutions and collaborate with startups, because each of them actually can add value for the other, and it's a win-win situation. It's not going to be like a one-way street. And today, a lot of GCCs are actually doing it. Probably more need to do it and do it on scale. When I say academic institutions, like we run a lot of centers of excellence in academic institutions. There are some GCCs which have their own centers of excellence with academic institutions. That really helps, because that you can focus on a particular technology domain. You can nurture startups through that. You can do skilling. You can involve in research programs, involve in translational activities. A lot of good research is happening in India, but then translation is, I think, something where we need to do a catch up, and that's where GCCs can play a role. GCCs also today are actively collaborating, and it can be done further increase is collaboration with startups. So there are so many ways, structured programs that they can run to collaborate, and whether it is incubating, co-creating, or there have been outright acquisitions also of startups. Startups are very high on their innovation index.
Correct.
So that's another thing. So I think they need to be more open and to collaborate, and there is a lot of opportunity around.
Got it. So I'm just going to again flip here to say your tenure in roles is just 2 years. How do you think long term while working in such short cycles? Like as a policy maker, like you said, building policies that last.
Yeah. So building policies and systems which can continue, and they set the pace for the future as well.
So I'm going to ask you another slightly controversial, because it is unfiltered. If another state or country came to you and said, how do we replicate Karnataka's success? What would you say the 3 to 5 non-negotiables are?
So I think the ecosystem which Karnataka has, it's not something. So certainly, by giving financial incentives, it cannot be replicated. Financial incentives is only a tip of the iceberg. Larger chunk is building the education ecosystem, the R&D ecosystem, overall conducive environment. Karnataka has always been known for its very inclusive and a very welcoming culture. People here are very open, and today you see people from all over the country coming and working in Karnataka. That is because people have been very, very welcoming, warm, receptive. And I think those are things which cannot be done overnight. So it's a effort of many decades, which has actually, many things have come together to build this ecosystem.
Got it. So I'm now going into a rapid fire question. So what is the one hard truth you've encountered about GCC that no one talks about?
Why should I talk about it?
Okay. So what is the one hard truth about GCCs that everyone talks about but you want to reiterate?
That they're creating value.
They're creating value. Okay. What's the most controversial opinion you hold about the GCC model? Not controversial, but what is the most contrarian opinion?
Yeah, so I think the common perception that they are GCCs are coming to India only because of cost arbitrage is something which needs to be dispelled. Maybe it was true some years ago, but that is not the case now. And in fact, if you look at top leadership roles, the salary structure is today fairly comparable to any other geography of the world.
Correct. Do you think that GCCs are a hype cycle, or do you think that this hype will continue?
I think, giving it a name of hype is not fair. The growth has been fairly linear in a way that, over the years it has been built up. And lot of things right now are just right for India, whether we look at it geopolitically, or we have a young population, we have a very highly educated large number of STEM graduates. We have a population which is, can speak the language which the world knows. So I think this momentum should continue, looking at the way India is poised at this moment.
Do you think India has the capability of being the Silicon Valley of the world?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, that's not just a pipe dream, but a reality.
Not at all. See, look at the indicators. Let's not just be... it's not just about rhetoric, but if you look at the numbers, the way, for example, in the startup ecosystem, the way we have scaled up in last 2 years itself, both two very well-respected surveys which happen globally. In Startup Genome survey, we have moved up from 21st place to 14th. In the Blink survey, we have moved up to a 10th position. There is a recent survey which has happened on, technology centers across the globe. Bangalore is 6th, most prominent technology center in the world today. And who are the comparables? There are 3 cities from US, one is London and Beijing, and 6th is Bangalore. So I think hard data talks, and we don't need to, it's not about sentiment. It's about actual work which is happening out of this place.
So, as many champions as we have of the GCC ecosystem, we have a lot of naysayers as well who keep pulling that down. What would your one feedback be to the naysayers?
I think they need to look at the data, look at what the reality, and the overall, take a macro picture of things. The contours are fairly clear.
So, what does unfiltered GCC success look like to you?
GCC not only contributing to the headquarter, but also building the overall ecosystem.
Here is an unfiltered GCC success. Well, thank you again, Dr. Kaur. It was a lovely conversation. It's very, very heartening to see how the ecosystem has evolved, the role of the government in helping shape this. And I think it's truly become an ecosystem because every single stakeholder today has their skin in the game. So as unfiltered as we'd like to be, like you said, and I think you brought in a great point, we need to move past the rhetoric of whether it's a hype or a down cycle. There will be pluses and minuses in everything. It's just keep our eye on the prize, keep at it, keep learning, and just trying to be better as an ecosystem every day. It has been a great conversation. Thank you so much
for
being on this episode of GCC Unfiltered.
Thanks. Pleasure being with you.
Yeah.